Hello, Phil Swann here again with another quick episode of Together, bringing together well-being, good mental health and the Christian hope. Today is March the 23rd and it's been designated in the UK as a National Day of Reflection because it was on March the 23rd last year, 2020, when Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, announced the first national lockdown in the UK. It was a sober day, and I'm sure you probably remember where you were when you either heard or watched his announcement to the nation. He warned us that very many lives would be lost. And on March the 23rd last year, at that particular point, 335 people had perished to the coronavirus we know as COVID-19. That number has escalated during the last 12 months. Over 143,000 people have died in the UK who now have as cause of death on their death certificate COVID-19. And over 125,000 people have died who tested positive in a COVID test and died within a 28-day period. This National Day of Reflection, we're encouraged to spend a moment in silence as a nation, or to light up our doorsteps tonight, as a way of acknowledging the grief and the sadness and the loss to those who have lost loved ones, to those who have perished. And I'm sure it's something that we would want to engage in. It's good to reflect. But each one of these numbers of lives lost, whether you take the 143,000 figure or the 125,000 figure, whichever figure you take, it's massive because each one of those numbers represents an individual human being, a person with a soul, a person who I hope was loved and understood and cared for and appreciated by others, and a person who is now no longer here. Grief is a terrible thing. It's an awful thing. It seems like a violent intrusion into the fizz of life. Grief we often speak of using heavy and dark words like the bitterness of grief or the darkness of grief. And maybe as you watch this, you are someone who has grieved over a lost loved one, as I have done in this last year. And even if you've not lost anyone to this virus, you have lost many things. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe you certainly have lost the freedom to do the things which we all took for granted. Maybe there is a grieving going on in you right now for those things which you simply can't do anymore. Grief is a process. Some people talk about there being 5 stages, others talk about there being 7, but clearly there are different stages in the way in which we process grief. Grief takes time, and it's important to grieve. If we don't grieve, we may easily find ourselves in a place with some pretty real emotional problems. Jesus once went to the funeral of a very good friend of his called Lazarus, and he grieves. He grieves openly. The shortest verse in the New Testament simply tells us that Jesus wept. And it was this outward expression of grief for his friend Lazarus that caused the people at the funeral, when seeing him weeping, to say, "Behold how he loved him." Lazarus was Jesus' friend, or one of his closest friends, and he grieves. And yet in the process of grieving and arriving at the village where Lazarus lived to comfort his sisters and those closest to Lazarus whose grief was deepest, he announces to us something incredible, something that shines as a brilliant light in the midst of our sense of loss and grief. "I am," he said, "the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever believes in me will never die." Jesus is offering us unique hope in the face of our greatest enemy, an enemy which sadly has been recognised in the UK today on an industrial scale and an enemy before which we are all ultimately powerless. And yet Jesus says, I have hope. There is hope. And this hope is found in me, because I am the resurrection and the life. Having said those words to one of Lazarus's grieving sisters, he then gently challenged her with these words. Do you believe this? And I want to ask you today, do you believe this? The Christian hope is the greatest hope because it offers us eternal life, the destruction of death, and the power that's behind death, sin. And all of this is focused on Jesus. This is why he says, I am the resurrection and the life. Because it is by his life, his death on the cross, and his resurrection from the dead that he not only proves his power over the power of death, but invites us to experience that by receiving his new life and the assurance and the confidence that when it's our turn to die, as die we will, it will be a glorious entrance into the wonder of eternity with him. Now, if you're grieving today, absolutely my heart goes out to you. Grief is a bitter and dreadful experience, and you can't go around it. You can't reverse from it. You have to go through it. And I hope you find those who will comfort you and support you in your grief. But in the midst of it all, please remember that there is a light that shines, that is brighter and more powerful than the power of your grief. And there is one who offers comfort, which is greater than any comfort that any human being can give, and who understands you and cares for you. His name is Jesus, and he is risen from the dead. Bring your sorrows to him and find his daily comfort as he will walk you through the process of grief. Well, may God bless you and keep you all on this sober day